Would there be a tendency for intelligence gatherers, briefers, to withhold now some vital intelligence to the president?
There very well might be.
MIMES. They come to MIMES.
Here come the men in black. They won't let you remember.
Newsflash, not all refugees are welcome here.
This is just another moment in this presidency where I thank God he's the president of the United States and Hillary Clinton is not.
Almost 8,000 black people are murdered every year in this country. And it's not by cops, it's by other black people.
If I wanted America to fail, to follow, not lead, to suffer, not prosper, to despair, not dream, I'd start with energy. I'd cut off America's supply of cheap, abundant energy. I couldn't take it by force, so I'd make Americans feel guilty about using the energy that heats their homes, fuels their cars, runs their businesses, and powers their economy. I'd make cheap energy expensive, so that expensive energy would seem cheap. I would empower unelected bureaucrats to all but outlaw America's most abundant sources of energy. And after banning its use in America, I'd make it illegal for American companies to ship it overseas. If I wanted America to fail, I'd use their schools to teach one generation of Americans that their factories and their cars will cause a new ice age. And I'd muster a straight face so I could teach the next generation that they're causing global warming. When it's cold out, I call it climate change instead. I'd imply that America's cities and factories could run on wind power and wishes. I'd teach children how to ignore the hypocrisy of condemning logging, mining, and farming while having roofs over their heads, heat in their homes, and food on their tables. I would never teach children that the free market is the only force in human history to uplift the poor, establish the middle class, and create lasting prosperity. Instead, I demonize prosperity itself so that they will not miss what they will never have. If I wanted America to fail, I would create countless new regulations and seldom cancel old ones that would be so complicated that only bureaucrats, lawyers, and lobbyists could understand them. That way small businesses with big ideas wouldn't stand a chance. And I would never have to worry about another Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, or Steve Jobs. I would ridicule as flat earthers those who urge them to lower energy costs by increasing supply. And when the evangelists of common sense try to remind people about the laws of supply and demand, I'd enlist the sympathetic media to drown them out. If I wanted America to fail, I would empower unaccountable bureaucracy seated in a distant capital to bully Americans out of their dreams and their property rights. I'd send federal agents to raid guitar factories for using the wrong kind of wood. I'd force homeowners to tear down their own homes built on their own land. I'd make it almost impossible for farmers to farm, miners to mine, loggers to log, and builders to build. Because I don't believe in free markets, I'd invent false ones. I'd devise fictitious products like carbon credits and trade them in imaginary markets. I'd convince people that this would create jobs and be good for the economy. If I wanted America to fail, for every concern I'd invent a crisis, and for every crisis I'd invent a cause, like shutting down entire industries and killing tens of thousands of jobs in the name of saving spotted owls. And when everyone learned the stunning irony that the owls were victims of their larger cousins and not people, it would already be decades too late. If I wanted America to fail, I'd make it easier to stop commerce than to start it, easier to kill jobs than create them, more fashionable to resent success than to seek it. When industries seek to create jobs, I'd file lawsuits to stop them, and then I'd make taxpayers pay for my lawyers. If I wanted America to fail, I would transform the environmental agenda from a document of conservation to an economic suicide pact. I would concede entire industries to our economic rivals by imposing regulations that cost trillions. I would celebrate those who preach environmental austerity in public while indulging a lavish lifestyle in private. I convince Americans that Europe has it right and that America has it wrong. If I wanted America to fail, I would prey on the goodness and the decency of ordinary Americans. I would only need to convince them that all of this is for the greater good. If I wanted America to fail, I suppose I wouldn't change a thing.
Professor Emeritus and Nation contributing editor Stephen Cohen, one of the country's preeminent Russia scholars. Professor Cohen, thanks a lot for joining us. Assess, if you would, the reaction today to this press conference and to the summit between Putin and Trump.
The reaction by most of the media, by the Democrats, by the anti-Trump people, is like mob violence. Yep. I've never seen anything like it in my life. This is the President of the United States doing what every president, Tucker, since Franklin Delano Roosevelt did in 1943 with Stalin, meeting with the head of the Kremlin. And every president since Eisenhower, a Republican by the way, has met with the leader of the Kremlin for one existential purpose: to avoid war between the two nuclear superpowers. Yep. Today, in my considered scholarly, long-time judgment, relations between the United States and Russia are more dangerous than they have ever, let me repeat, ever been, including the Cuban Missile Crisis. I want my president to do, I didn't vote for this president, but I want my president to do what every other president has done. Sit with the head of the other nuclear superpower and walk back the conflicts that could lead to war, whether they be in Syria, Ukraine, in the Baltic nations, in these accusations of cyber attacks. Every president has been encouraged to do that and applauded by both parties, not Trump. Look what they did to him today. They held a kangaroo court. They found him guilty. And then you have the former head of the United States CIA, who himself ought to be put under oath and asked about his role in inventing Russiagate, calling the President of the United States treasonous. What have we come to in this country? And what's going to happen in the future?
Well, those are questions that adults ought to be discussing, I think. But tell me if my assessment is wrong. It seems almost as if some in our leadership class on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, seek increased conflict with Russia. Do you think that's right? And if it is, why?
All right, you've asked a fundamental question. Do they know what they're doing? Yeah. I don't know. They seem to hate or resent the idea of Trump as president, that they've all lost all sense of American national security. I would ask them a question. If you ever get these people on, ask them this question. For yourself, for me, for the nation. Do you, these people who are hunting Trump, do you prefer trying to impeach Trump to trying to avert war with nuclear Russia?
Protection Bureau was created by Congress and President Obama in 2010 to focus on curbing predatory practices and other problems with lenders. But there has always been division over its mission. It's been applauded by most Democrats, vilified by many Republicans, and by the industry. President Trump and its acting director have charted a dramatically different course for the Bureau. Today, as William Brangan tells us, those two visions collided in a showdown on Capitol Hill.
The acting director of the CFPB, as it's often called, is Mick Mulvaney. He's also the president's budget director. Ooh. The day he took over the agency 4 months ago, he said the agency was an awful example of a bureaucracy gone wrong. Since then, he's proposed changing its independence from Congress, how it's funded, and easing its overall approach towards lenders. Today, when he testified before the Senate Banking Committee, he delivered a very different kind of hello and took a swipe at the agency's charter.
I evidently made a little bit of news yesterday when I reminded everybody, at least pointed out the fact that while I have to be here by statute, I don't think I have to answer your questions. If you take a look at the actual statute that requires me to be here, it says that I shall appear before the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate. And I'm here and I'm happy to do it. I want to make it clear, I'm going to answer every question that I can today. I'm not using this as an excuse not to answer your questions. But the statute says I have to appear.
One of the senators on that committee is Democrat Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. The CFPB is considered her brainchild from when she was a Harvard professor. And at one point early on, her name was bandied about as its possible first director. That didn't happen, but she remains a big defender of the Bureau's original mission. And today, she had some choice words from Mulvaney.
You've taken obvious joy in talking about how the agency will help banks a lot more than it will help consumers, and how upset this must make me. But here's what you don't get, Mr. Mulvaney. This isn't about me. This is about active duty military. It's about first responders and students and seniors and families and millions of other people who need someone on their side when consumers get cheated. You are hurting real people to score cheap political points.
For the President of the United States to side with President Putin against American law enforcement, American defense officials, American intelligence agencies, is thoughtless, it's dangerous, it's weak. The President is putting himself over our country. Starting with the President's trip to NATO, ending with his shameful performance at today's press conference, President Trump has strengthened our adversaries while weakening our defenses and those of our allies. A single ominous question now hangs over the White House. What could possibly cause President Trump to put the interests of Russia over those of the United States? Millions of Americans will continue to wonder if the only possible explanation for this dangerous behavior is the possibility that President Putin holds damaging information over President Trump. Like any patriotic American, I was absolutely appalled by the press conference that capped off the President's trip to Europe this morning. I didn't think it could get worse than his performance at the NATO summit, but it sure did. In just the last week alone, the President attacked our closest allies in NATO, calling the European Union a foe, meddled in the domestic affairs of an ally.
Until May of 2017, and in late May of 2017, following your appointment of Robert Mueller, Agent Strzok became part of Special Counsel Mueller's investigative team until late July of 2017, when he was removed by Special Counsel Mueller and returned to the FBI. Any disagreement about that timeline?
I don't know the precise dates, but that sounds generally accurate.
During 11, Agent Strzok also admitted that before and during that same year...
A point of order, Mr. Chairman. We had a closed hearing on Peter Strzok. If you want to follow his testimony like this, release the transcript. Have an open hearing. Don't characterize and not let him testify.
That is
Don't
not
take things out of context. Release his transcript.
That is not a valid point of order. Gentlemen, proceed.
So Agent Strzok also... Agent Strzok also...
Gentleman states point of order.
I assume it is a valid point of order to object to quoting or characterizing statements in a confidential setting.
Release the transcript, Mr. Chairman. American people deserve to hear Peter Strzok's testimony under oath. Do not hide his testimony.
The testimony, Mr. Chairman, as you know from transcribed interviews can be used for hearing purposes.
Release the transcribed interview to the American people.
The transcript will be released to the American people at the appropriate time, but the gentleman can use it for the purpose of this question to the witness in the hearing.
We were under the impression, Mr. Chairman, that these transcripts were not to be quoted.
The chair has ruled.
Shut up, Needler.
Gentlemen,
Needle dick.
Agent Strzok also admitted that before and during that same year, Agent Strzok admitted that before and during that same year, he sent many, many text messages about Donald Trump. Text messages that we've already established and you've agreed.
It's a little recalcitrant.
Nadler interrupting again.
The gentleman finished? So again, Agent Strzok sent many text messages about Donald Trump. We've established, and you've agreed, that those reflect a hatred and bias towards Donald Trump. Now, I reviewed with Agent Strzok, and he confirmed that he was in fact the person who sent the text messages that said, F Trump, Trump is an effing idiot, that talked about stopping Trump from becoming president, that talked about impeaching Trump as the president, that talked about protecting the country from Trump, and talked about an insurance policy against the risk of a Trump presidency, just to name a few. Those are the very same texts, by the way, that Inspector General Horowitz, as you know, characterized as deeply troubling and expressed his concern that Agent Strzok may have acted upon the bias expressed in those Trumps in prioritizing his work on the Russia collusion investigation on the Wiener laptop issue, a matter that he's now investigating. Now, when I asked Agent Strzok about his conversations with Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his team about his removal, he described the details of a single conversation. He said it lasted about 10 or 15 minutes, but certainly less than 30 minutes. He said Special Counsel Mueller made it very clear that he was being removed from the case because of the text messages, but I was surprised that he said that neither Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his team asked him about the text or his expressed hatred of Donald Trump. He said Special Counsel never asked him what he meant when he sent those texts. He said that Special Counsel Mueller never asked him if he acted upon the bias and the hatred reflected in those texts. I asked Agent Strzok at least a half a dozen times, did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his team ever ask you about these troubling text messages and whether any of your actions taken, whether any of your decisions made, and whether any of the evidence you collected may have been corrupted or tainted or in any way influenced by the hatred, bias, or prejudice expressed in these texts? He repeatedly and unequivocally said no. Yes, we know that Special Counsel Mueller removed him from the case, but what did Special Counsel Mueller do to determine whether or how the actions taken, the decisions made, and the evidence gathered by a Donald Trump hating lead investigator, how that may have prejudiced Donald Trump as a subject? Evidence, by the way, that Agent Strzok unequivocally stated in the presence of FBI counsel that became part of the Special Counsel Mueller's foundational evidence and that was used by the Special Counsel team. If Special Counsel Mueller was here, I know what I would ask him, but he's not, but his supervisor is. So, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, what, if anything, has Special Counsel Mueller done to determine whether the actions taken, the decisions made, and the evidence collected by Special Agent Peter Strzok was impacted by his very clear hatred and bias of President Trump?
Congressman, as I know you're aware, Director Mueller has vast experience both as a prosecutor and as a supervisor of the FBI. So I can assure you that he understands the importance of considering any credibility issues and determining whether or not to rely upon a person. With regard to the...
Well, so let me stop you. So what actions has he taken as his supervisor?
Well, we're not going to talk publicly about the substance of the investigation.
I don't want you to do that. Can you tell me whether you know he has taken steps to determine?
Yes. Director Mueller has taken appropriate steps. And keep in mind, Congressman...
well, so let me stop you there. I'm thrilled to hear that he's taken steps. You and I are both former prosecutors. How does a prosecutor go about eliminating bias, prejudice, and expressed hatred from foundational evidence? Because you know, of course, that if your root evidence is fairly called into question, everything that comes from that evidence is fairly called into question, right?
Yes, I realize I'm just about out of time, but to give a somewhat comprehensive response, as you know, when we conduct an investigation, the purpose is to determine whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prove. The purpose is to determine whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prove a case in court. And if you're going to court and you're taking a piece of evidence, you're relying upon a witness, you need to consider any issues that go to the credibility of the witness or the credibility of the evidence. And so you use the term foundational evidence. I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind, but if, for example, Director Mueller were to rely upon a document that Mr. Strzok produced or a statement that he took or were to call him as a witness, obviously you need to consider that evidence that would be evidence that would tend to impeach his credibility.
Special counsel investigation, which you are overseeing, does his relationship with James Comey give you any pause in terms of the appointment, of the decision to appoint him for that post?
Now, I've explained that I made the decision to appoint Director Mueller based upon his reputation. He had an excellent reputation, really bipartisan support for his integrity, and that's why I made that decision. I'm not going to be able to comment upon what he may or may not be investigating, but I can assure you that if there were conflicts that arose because of Director Mueller, anybody employed by Director Mueller, we have a process within the department to take care of that. We have ethics experts who review any allegations of conflicts, so I'm confident that we'll reach the right result.
Talk about a chilling effect when you have that person say those kind of things to you. This needs to be investigated, and this is the kind of behavior that should not be tolerated.
Congressman, it's Sandra. So what do you say to the critics who call into question the timing of all this? After having those indictments handed down and now calls from you and some of your colleagues, I mean, what do even your Republican colleagues think of this? I know some of them are questioning this move.
We've been pushing all along. Sandra, we started 1 year ago this month calling for a second special counsel. I don't like special counsels, but I see no other remedy. How does the FBI investigate themselves? How does the DOJ investigate themselves? I mean, think about this. Rod Rosenstein is overseeing an investigation by Mr. Mueller looking at possible obstruction of justice into the firing of James Comey, and Rod Rosenstein wrote the memo recommending the firing of James Comey. So when have you ever seen... Think about this fact. Think about this. I've never seen this in a federal agency. James Comey's been fired. Andy McCabe has been fired, lied 3 times under oath, faces a criminal referral. Jim Rubicki, chief of staff, has left the FBI. James Baker, former chief counsel, was demoted, then left the FBI. Lisa Page, FBI counsel, was demoted, then left the FBI. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, demoted, lost his clearance for a while, and is still at the FBI. When have you ever seen 6 key people in a federal agency that ran the 2 most important investigations, the Clinton investigation and the Trump-Russia investigation? When have you ever seen that happen? So this is what we're dealing with, and we're just trying to get answers, and they keep slow-walking us now for a year.
Well, and we saw a heated exchange between the two of you at that hearing in June, where you pressed Rod Rosenstein for answers, and you asked why you are not getting them. I mean, are you hearing anything from his camp?
Well, here's the other thing, Sandra. It's not just Jim Jordan. The House of Representatives took a vote 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago today, we took a vote and said, a majority of the House said, you're not getting us the information we are entitled to as a separate and equal branch of government required to do oversight. You're not getting us that information. And the House of Representatives voted and said, get us the information.
And that is that it is time that there are consequences for some of the things that are going on in Washington. Look, I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years. I've run for office 5 times. I believe in consequences. And when people violate the law, there needs to be consequences. And we're not seeing that in Washington. We're not seeing people made accountable for what they've done. So to answer your question directly, I have spoken to him, not about getting the job, no, but about having someone in that job. I don't care who it is, as long as it's an attorney general who's not in the closet hiding somewhere, who 24 hours after he took the job said, I'm not going to do anything with respect to the election, and that's all we've been talking about for a year and a half.
Would you take the job?
I haven't been offered the job.
Okay.
That's not a no.
That's not a no.
Well, let's talk a little about Russia. He met with Putin in Helsinki. A lot of folks, Democrats and Republicans, agree it was probably not the best idea because it kind of undermines our country. What do you think?
Not the best idea, Whoopi? Come on. Every president in the last 75 years has met with the head of the Kremlin. And I think the most important thing to take back from this meeting is the fact that Russia and the United States have more nuclear power than the rest of the world. It's important, and I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, the way, one of the ways to win is to make an enemy a friend. I'm not saying they should be friends, but what I'm saying is this. We come out of that meeting. We are arming the people in the Ukraine, $70 billion worth of arms, while Barack Obama stood by and let Russia go in. Let me finish. Crimea was annexed, and as a result of the annexing of Crimea, we have thrown out Russian officials and nationalists. We've closed consulates. We are also in the United States making sure that with respect to Russia, if had Obama done anything about that red line, we wouldn't be... He
opens up an investigation into Russian collusion.
I came here... Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Okay, that but for Obama drawing the line in the red sand and doing nothing about a red line in the sand, we wouldn't have killed hundreds of Russians who were over there.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. So you're all for people meeting and having conversations. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Well, that's precedent.
Okay. Then how did you feel when Obama met with, I don't know, name somebody who... Castro or met
Raul
with...
Castro?
Yeah. Were you comfortable with that?
I don't have a problem with people talking. That's one of the things that we need now. We need people to talk. People who ostensibly hate each other. It's time we sat down and had
one thing that jumped out at me is you said there should be consequences for laws. My understanding of the annexing of Crimea was that it was an international agreement that they could not go into Crimea. So those were consequences, and that means we won't sit down at a table. We will push back on you, Russia. And that's so. I'm just curious if that's.
And what did Barack Obama do?
It doesn't matter, Denise.
Barack Obama is no longer president. How much longer are we going to be rehashing this?
We want to hear what everybody has to say. We want to hear what everybody has to say, so let's not talk over each other.
Reason why we're in the place we are now.
President Obama opens up an investigation into Russian meddling, and this president fired James Comey, the person that was conducting the investigation. So what about that?
What about that? Okay, I'm glad you asked that question.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, one of the problems with meddling and this whole Russian investigation is there are two issues. Number one, was there meddling? Everybody agrees there was meddling. Donald Trump agrees there was meddling. Although Barack Obama said about a month before the election, there's no way anyone could meddle in the election. There can't be a rigged election.
Do remember that your friend also was made aware of the meddling. He was aware.
That's not what I'm saying.
I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm adding to what you're putting out.
The second part of the Russian investigation is what I write my book about.
Yes.
And that is when individuals in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, get together and tee up a fake investigation with a fake dossier paid for by a woman running for president that the DOJ, the FBI take to a
paid for by Republicans first.
No. It was paid for by the DNC and Hillary Clinton.
Paid for by the Republicans first. Paid for by the Republicans first.
Come on. I wonder what Republican that was. Do you know?
Paid for by Republicans.
It's been referred, actually. It was a donor to one of his primary opponents.
I'll finish this. So then they take it to a court, and the court then issues a warrant to spy on Americans. Now, if you're not offended by that, whether you're Republican or Democrat, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, and the evidence is made clear from the email, text messages from the top FBI counterintelligence guy. We're going to stop him. It's not going to happen. We'll get an insurance policy. The insurance policy is Russia collusion.
Senator Kamala Harris claimed that President Trump nominating a new justice to the Supreme Court in the wake of Anthony Kennedy's retirement means we're looking at the destruction of the Constitution.
You know, members of the Trump administration, random Trump supporters being mobbed and attacked in restaurants and having, you know, congresswomen saying, that's great. Steve Bannon, I think you saw, was in some bookstore and a woman just starts screaming at him. The bookstore owner, bless her heart, said, we're a bookstore, can you please not harass our patrons? And so liberals started putting the name and address of the bookstore online so that the bookstore could be harassed for not stopping the woman who was screaming at Steve Bannon.
The whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers, with the wisdom of a serpent. whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Now, Richard, you have attracted a lot of attention because of your call for impeachment hearings against Donald Trump. Now, in your legal opinion, what is it exactly that Trump has done that is an impeachable offense?
Well, with respect to evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors, we are certainly well beyond the point we were in 1973 when the United States House and Senate convened hearings in the Judiciary Committee to look at the conduct of President Nixon and others in his administration. The evidence with respect to President Trump and others, including potentially Vice President Pence, involves obstruction of justice in the Russia investigation. The firing of the F.B.I. Director James Comey, attempts to fire others in the Justice Department, trying to persuade the Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse from the Russia investigation so he could in turn fire Robert Mueller, drafting of false statements by President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., in connection with the Trump Tower meeting. It goes on and on. There is a clear attempt to obstruct the Russia investigation. Collaboration with the Russians. We have the President of the United States and potentially also the Kushner family and Jared Kushner receiving profits and benefits from dealings with foreign governments in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the United States. That is strictly prohibited under the Constitution and is a critically important anti-corruption provision of the Constitution that needs to be enforced. It's not being enforced by this Congress, but it needs to be done. We also, of course, have the President blatantly violating the First Amendment right of free to exercise of religion through discriminatory steps he's taken toward Muslim Americans and his threats and indeed some hostile actions toward the free press, also in violation of the First Amendment. So this president has some serious problems under the Constitution.
All right, Professor Painter, where are these proceedings at in terms of the charges against Trump that you have filed and the status of them?
Well, the proceedings that should be happening in the United States House and Senate aren't happening at all because the Republicans are in control of both houses, don't want to do anything about Donald Trump. They're too busy investigating the FBI for spying on Russian spies. I thought that's what the FBI was supposed to do, but they're doing that, and they're going through Hillary's email or whatever else they do. So there's no investigation over there. So that has led those of us who are concerned about President Trump, when we believe we have an avenue of relief in the United States federal courts, to take action. The lawsuits that I'm involved in concern the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, which prohibits the foreign government profits and benefits going to the president or anyone else holding a position in the United States government.
And welcome back to Hannity. So during my exclusive interview with Julian Assange, we discussed how WikiLeaks exposed the rampant collusion between the mainstream media here in America and the Clinton campaign. Let's take a look. I said in my country, Julian, that journalism is dead. I said it in 2008 because I was investigating Barack Obama and his backgrounds and his associations and his career and his lack of knowledge and his radical belief system. And everybody in the media ignored a lot of it. So my question to you then is, now knowing what WikiLeaks revealed about the Podesta emails, on Clinton corruption, on pay-to-play, on Bernie Sanders being cheated, all of this is revealed. Not a lot of it was covered. So what does that say to the American people about media coverage in America? Dishonest?
It's very dishonest. Corrupt is interesting. It depends on your definition. If you look at what we published in the Podesta email,
if they're colluding with Hillary, that's not corrupt.
It's ethical corruption.
They're not identifying it to their audiences. They claim that they're objective journalists.
It's ethically corrupt. Corrupt by corruption also means something in law, which is that you're taking money in exchange.
Okay.
So I don't think that
collusion.
They're colluding, yeah.
Okay, because they share her political agenda. Well, why else would they collude? Or they hate Donald Trump?
I think that's an optimistic interpretation, that they share the political agenda.
Well, explain that.
It's more like, you rub my back, I'll rub yours. I'll give you, I'll give you information. You'll come to my, I'll invite you to my child's christening or our next big party, or do you know what I mean? We go to
or a steak dinner.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, and I think that you've put your finger on an answer to the question I asked last, which was why would they put out these seemingly purposeless indictments? Well, I have no doubt in my mind that it has something to do with this upcoming Putin-Trump meeting and just trying to throw a stick in the spokes. Do you think I'm reading that correctly?
Yep.
No, I think it's an effort to undercut the president.
Yep.
I also think it's an effort to bolster the sagging credibility of Mr. Mueller, because his investigation is looking more and more to the American people like a partisan witch hunt, which it is. So it has that PR aspect, and they probably have a confidence that it will never get to trial. You'll recall the last time Mr. Mueller indicted 13 Russians, he was shocked when they showed up for trial. He's refused to produce anything in discovery, which they're entitled to under our system, and he's argued that he can't go to trial now because the matter is still under investigation. Well, if that's true, then why did he bring the indictments? That case is a shambles. Let me say quickly that we need your support here at InfoWars to extend this extraordinarily good coverage. So please go to the InfoWars store now.
I mean, but throughout the team, you've got people working for Bob Mueller who have active connections to Hillary Clinton. You know, Greg Anders donated to the Clinton campaign. Kyle Freeney donated to the Clinton campaign. Andrew Goldstein donated to the Clinton campaign. Elizabeth Pregelar donated to the Clinton campaign. James Quarles donated to the Clinton campaign. Jeannie Rhee represented Ben Rhodes during the Benghazi investigation. She represented the Clinton Foundation against Freedom of Information Act requests. Andrew Weissman, the #2 for Mueller, attended Hillary Clinton's election night party. Aaron Zellaby represented Justin Cooper, who is the person who set up Hillary Clinton's private email server. And then there's you and Miss Page.
Constitution doesn't address this. Another question is this: can a sitting president be indicted or criminally prosecuted? Again, there is no clear answer, but it has never happened. However, twice the Department of Justice has issued legal opinions stating, quote, indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would be unconstitutional because it would impermissibly interfere with the president's ability to carry out his constitutionally assigned function.
He had been contacted by a man using an alias, as it turns out, Henry Greenberg, who had information that he said would be of great value to the Trump campaign.
Every congresswoman would take the call if they got that call. Oh, we got op research on your opponent.
I took the meeting, and Henry Greenberg turns out to be an FBI informant of Russian descent who's been admitted to the country 9 times on informant visas, who is a violent felon who otherwise could not be in the country. And then he tries to entrap me, but he gives away the game when he says he wants $2 million for negative information on Hillary. When I tell him I don't have $2 million, he says it's not your money I want, it's Donald Trump's money.
Now, I want you to listen to this really quick again, because it's going to be important.
Your girlfriend texts you, Clinton just has to win now. And you reply a few days later, and damn, this feels momentous, because this matters. The other one did too, but that was to ensure we didn't F something up.
The other one did too, and it wanted to make sure we didn't fuck something up. Well, that is the insurance policy. And that was getting Hillary exonerated and to frame Trump. That's what that is. That's the insurance policy. Let Hillary go free and frame Trump with the Russian deal.
This matters because this matters. So super glad to be on this voyage with you. Did Bob Mueller ask you why this matters?
If you're asking why it mattered, it was a comparison between a case about...
I've seen you do this where you answer questions that are not asked, but that is not what I'm asking you. I want to know if Bob Mueller asked you about this text message.
Director Mueller did not ask me about any text message.
It is July 16th, 2018. Many are saying this is a day that will live in infamy.
Chris Como, the fucking queer.
Remembered as the day the presidency, as a symbol of America's protection, died. But I see something else as the result here. I think we hit bottom. And if so, there's a blessing in that, because there can be no more debate about which way is up. Donald John Trump delivered us here with a display of cowardly self-interest. His decision to choose to believe Vladimir Putin over his own government on the matter of Russian attacks on our election.
Wasn't our own intel, it was Obama's intel, you fucking piece of shit, Como.
You're absolutely right, and I think that you've put your finger on an answer to the question I asked last, which was why would they put out these seemingly purposeless indictments? Well, I have no doubt in my mind that it has something to do with this upcoming Putin-Trump meeting and just trying to throw a stick in the spokes. Do you think I'm reading that correctly?
Yep.
No, I think it's an effort to undercut the president.
Yep.
I also think it's an effort to bolster the sagging credibility of Mr. Mueller, because his investigation is looking more and more to the American people like a partisan witch hunt, which it is. So it has that PR aspect, and they probably have a confidence that it will never get to trial. You'll recall the last time Mr. Mueller indicted 13 Russians, he was shocked when they showed up for trial. He's refused to produce anything in discovery, which they're entitled to under our system, and he's argued that he can't go to trial now because the matter is still under investigation. Well, if that's true, then why did he bring the indictments? That case is a shambles. And look, the entire role of Fusion GPS here is coming more clearly into focus. There were so many copies of this dossier going to the Justice Department from planters that it's hard to keep track of them. The alleged journalist David Korn with Mother Jones was the source of a copy. That's the problem with crack. It often has corn in it. We also know that we had John McCain passing a copy of this in. McCain should be forced to answer under oath what he knew about the origins of the dossier and whether he knew it was fabricated when he passed it on to the UN. If he is too sick to answer those questions, his staffer who did the legwork should be compelled to testify.
Yep.
These documents also allegedly stated, quote, there was a continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump surrogates and intermediaries for the Russian government. Now, again, I'm telling you this as it's coming out, so, you know. But if it's true, it's obviously extremely serious. And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
Very well.
There was enormous breaking news today. When I made the case that I did not believe that the DNC had been hacked by the Russians, in fact, that I did not believe it had been hacked at all, and made the point that the Democratic National Committee had refused to allow the FBI to inspect its servers, instead using a paid-for IT firm called CloudStrike, I was corrected by Congressman Jackie Speer of California, who informed me that she now knew that the DNC had, in fact, turned over their servers to the FBI. This was essentially seconded by Congressman Adam Schiff of California. This came to an extraordinary surprise to Trey Gowdy, the Republican from South Carolina. Mr. Gowdy pointed out to his Democratic colleagues that FBI Director James Comey and Homeland Security Secretary Johnson had both testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee that the FBI had not been allowed to examine the DNC servers. This is a bombshell revelation. Somebody is lying. It is either Congressman Schiff and Congressman Speer, or, of course, it is Mr. Comey and Secretary Johnson. You won't find this or hear it anyplace else other than here at InfoWars.
You know that we love DJT. Love him. But he is like that, kind of that Vince Lombardi, George Hallis, General Patton. You love their leadership, but every time they speak, you think, oh no. You never had to worry about Obama. Obama didn't do anything and didn't say anything. But you never worried about, like, he might say something stupid. Because Obama was just cool. Hey, everybody. Hey. Obama's like that. Remember those obnoxious servers at TGI Fridays with the suspenders and the pins? Hi, everybody. My name is Brad. I'll be your friend. And they're very like they've got it all down. It's like, what is this? This guy wants to be my friend. You're Brad. Just get us a drink.
You know, I got a question too. I don't know how many people remember or followed the Comey testimony on President Trump and Russian investigation on July 8, 2017, but one question that has just irked me all of this time for all of this, and mainstream media never said a peep about it, nobody else has said anything about it. Why did Mueller, after he was fired, meet with Special Counsel Mueller about a week before his testimony? Now, he was no longer an employee of the federal government. In fact, he was a private citizen by then. And if he needed attorney advice, why didn't he go seek an attorney? Why did he go seek special Mueller's counsel before his testimony? This alone taints the case. Okay, this is fruit of the poison tree. And anything that they gathered up in their intelligence during the Trump campaign and transition at Trump Tower is also fruit of a poison tree. This is why you saw in the newspaper this morning that Department of Justice now claims they have no records of any wiretapping at Trump Tower. This also begs to answer the question, then how did they know Flynn had spoken to anyone?
Special counsel investigation, which you are overseeing, does his relationship with James Comey give you any pause in terms of the appointment of the decision to appoint him for that post?
No, I've explained that I made the decision to appoint Director Mueller based upon his reputation. He had an excellent reputation, really bipartisan support.
Being a millennial congressman, that's fantastic. What's it like when they don't know that you're Congressman Gates? You're walking around D.C., maybe having a bite in a restaurant, to be pro-Trump. Would you ever wear a MAGA hat?
Oh, absolutely. Well, in my district, President Trump is about as popular as oxygen. And so it's exciting to be able to go out and share the enthusiasm. Here in Washington, people don't like Trump because they don't like change. What I've started to notice is there really is, it really doesn't matter if the Republicans or Democrats have been in charge, because both are valets for just a different set of special interests. What Donald Trump has injected into this process is the notion that we've got to disrupt the status quo, and we've got to get better ideas and better people in place so that all the American people can thrive.
He's getting some pushback from Republicans, though, surprisingly.
A lot of Republicans don't want to change this town.
Well, going into the election, it's pretty clear that I was predicting that he would win and that he would have a lot of problems once he did win, because this town...
You're talking about certain Republicans, though. You got to start specifying them out. You're talking about Senator Corker, who else? Corker, Flake, Collins, what the hell's his name? John McCain, Mitt Romney, those kind of guys that are in the Republican Party. Those are the ones you gotta really watch, because they're the backstabbers. They're the establishment boys. They're the swamp creatures. The fat alligator sitting on the side with a cocktail is John McCain, and with a monocle in his eye for another alligator, that's like Romney. And Paul Ryan, he's the little rat that goes and grabs whatever the alligator is wanting. Hey, Ryan, why don't you go get us a nice big old egg from that chicken coop over there? And Ryan does it because he's butt boy. He's a follower. But anyway, let's finish up with these guys here. This is Eric Broling.
Who doesn't want to change, whether you're Democrat, liberal, or even on the right? I call them rhinos, Republicans in name only. They didn't want to be moved out either. They didn't want change.
Yeah, and but the country is so happy. I mean, as you've talked to folks around America, as I chat with folks regularly in the district, as we use a variety of new and engaging platforms to be able to get feedback from folks, I think it's really been overwhelmingly positive. And people like that Trump's not a politician. Sure, he violates some norms, and I would say maybe he's a little rough around the edges, but in a way, there's a unique American element to that. Some of our greatest presidents have been disruptors, have been change agents, and I think that the presidency of Donald Trump will really be viewed in a lot of the same way as the presidency of Andrew Jackson, a populist who came to this town and said we're putting the people over kind of the government intelligentsia.
It really kind of irks me as a pro-Trump Republican to see so much pushback by the anti-Trumpers. I mean, even in the Senate, there are longtime senators, some of them who are stepping down. I think of Flake, I think of McCain, but there are also current senators, Lindsey Graham, who aren't on the Trump agenda, and that just drives me crazy.
Do you think part of it is just pure jealousy? I mean, I think every senator wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and says, you know, "Good morning, Mr. President," or "Good morning, Madam President." And the fact that Trump was able to just take, you know, politics by storm, really. I mean, do you think it's jealousy or sincere dislike?
Could be. Listen, before we go, I did not set this up. I just want to let you know. On Monday, this coming Monday, I'm going to be on Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough. Now, I understand you're representing his hometown.
That's right. Back when Joe used to be a conservative, he represented Florida's 1st congressional district, and now he's an MSNBC liberal talk show host. So I'm glad Joe's been successful, but in Northwest Florida, we prefer conservative representation.
All right.
Is Texas Congressman and a member of the House Judiciary Committee, Louis Gohmert. Congressman, good morning to you.
Always great to be with you.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
All right, you know, the courts have been involved in this extensively.
Yes.
Now the president's come out with it.
Unconstitutionally, by the way. They don't have that authority under Article 3, but they hadn't let the Constitution get in their way of legislating.
What do you think of the new restrictions on travelers?
I think they're great. I think they're very well spoken, and they articulate the reasons as to why they designated the 8 countries. You know, for example, Venezuela and Chad, and I mean, these all 8 countries are countries where, as the FBI representatives have testified before our committee, yes, you always hear that we will vet the refugees, but you got to understand, when we don't have any information from that country, the process of vetting is taking the information the individual gives us and comparing it to what we have from the country. We'll vet it, but we don't have any information from those countries. So I think the president's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's protecting America because we don't know who these people are.
This is what he ran on. He was talking about extreme vetting.
I love it when somebody gets elected that actually keeps their word. It's awesome.
It's so unusual for some people in Washington these days, particularly when it comes, Louis, to health care.
Yes.
And there were so many Republicans in the Senate who said, you know, give me a chance, re-elect me.
Hey, listen,
and now it looks like this is DOA.
Oh, I was out there in Arizona last year, and frankly, I think Dr. Kelly Ward would have won if, well, of course, the president came out and endorsed John McCain, a rare mistake.
Now McCain is saying no.
Yeah, well, he is one of those that said, I will repeal. If he had said last year what he was going to do, Kelly Ward would have beat him. And Kirkpatrick would have beat him. But, you know, nothing inhibits recovery from cancer like stress. I think Arizona could help him and us, recall him, let him, you know, fight successfully this terrible cancer. And let's get somebody in here who will keep the word he gave last year.
Say that again. What are you suggesting? He be recalled?
I think it would, I think it would be very helpful to him and the country. He's got cancer. It's a tough battle. But stress is a real inhibitor toward getting over cancer. So let him go back, deal with the cancer, let Arizona recall him so that we can get somebody that will keep his word from last year.
He says, among other things, he would like this to be in regular order.
Bipartisan. He wants bipartisan.
What's the matter with that?
Nothing's wrong with it, but the problem is the Democrats will not allow any repeal of anything in Obamacare to be bipartisan. I mean, they really put the pressure on their people. Don't you dare support the Republicans at all, because there are a few that would like to be with us, but the pressure is immense. So we're not the ones keeping it from being bipartisan. It goes back to Henry Waxman passing it. He said, we don't need Republican votes. We don't want your input. And actually, as Joe Barton told me, he said if John Dingell had still, I mean, John is quite liberal when it comes to health care, but he's a very honest, honorable man. If he had stayed as chairman, he would have gotten Republican input. It would have been bipartisan, but they didn't do it bipartisan, and they are not going to allow us to have any Democratic votes to repeal what needs doing.
Louis, I got a feeling you're going to take heat for that comment about him getting recalled.
Look, the reason I say that, I was down in Lufkin at the Forest Fair, East Texas Fair, all over East Texas. People are hurting, and there are people who have diseases, and they lost their doctor, they lost their
insurance. And Obamacare's not working for them?
And they're begging, please, you've got to repeal this. You've got to give me some help. appoint a second special counsel to investigate Mueller, Comey, Lynch, and the Clintons. He's got to. Nobody else can do it.
Why does he have to?
Because nobody else can do it. And
why do you need another investigator?
Because Comey, as we've now found out, he lied more than we even thought. We know that Mueller was his confidant. By law, Mueller is disqualified from investigating Comey. We have got to have a second special prosecutor to investigate, and Jeff Sessions recused himself from anything touching Russia. Well, the Clintons touched Russia, so only the president is going to be able to make that appointment. He's got to do that for the sake of the country.
But if he does that, that's going to be a bigger story. It's going to be he's trying to get rid of Mueller.
It would have been better if he could have fired Mueller. But the very day Comey testified that there is no collusion between Trump and the Russians, that was a day that Mueller realized, oh my gosh, I don't have a basis for being here. So he leaked out that very day, I'm now investigating Trump for obstruction, just so that Trump couldn't fire him and he could keep his job. Comey and Mueller colluded to get a special counsel. We've got to have a special counsel to investigate Comey's lies, and Mueller can't do it. He's disqualified. We've got to have a second special counsel.
Well, let's see what happens. All right, Louis, thank you very much.
Always great to be with you, my friend. Thank you.
So what do you think?
Remember, Comey, 2 weeks before he testified in front of Congress, went and met with Mueller privately as though he was still working for the government and he had already been fired. So him meeting with Mueller as a private citizen who was fired by the government is another big problem for Mueller and Comey's investigation into anything. The collusion that's going on between those two is definitely shown to be accurate by all accounts by Senator Gomet.
California Congressman Darrell Issa, a member of the House Judiciary Oversight and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, it's good to see you, and if I may, President Trump, in a sense, did the equivalent of 25 plus years ago, Margaret Thatcher saying to George Herbert Walker Bush, "Don't go wobbly, George." I think there's a lot to be said in that previous segment about the president saying to our closest and strongest ally that we want to be close on trade, not just on defense, and it's a lot easier to be close with Britain when they do put money into defense than with Europe, where they're a little too stingy on supporting NATO.
Yeah, so you were comfortable then with the comments?
Well, I'm always comfortable with sending a message that opens a dialogue, and I think that's what the president's very good at, is he's going to have a very candid debate about what it takes for the United States and Britain to get much closer together, including a trade relationship that should be mutually beneficial to two very large trading partners.
As you were one of the key questioners, excellent work, Congressman. We watched it, and it was really an incredible hearing. Embattled FBI agent Peter Strzok testifying before the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees over his anti-Trump hate text messages. You asked Mr. Strzok to read aloud to the committee his text. Let's take a look.
I'm going to just go to a date and then ask you to read your own words.
Hi, how is Trump other than Trump is a disaster? I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be.
Ms. Page said, not ever going to become president, right? Right?
No, he's not. We'll stop it. What the F happened to our country, Lise?
Okay, read it again that way.
Sir, did you not? Was it not
I just want to hear it.
You just want to hear it for me to repeat it?
Please.
Okay, sir. Sure. Happy to indulge you. I can't pull away. What the F happened to our country, Lise?
Happy to indulge you. Congressman, he was so adamant and aggressive, confident. What was your reaction?
Well, I wanted the American people to hear it. He kept thinking that it was somehow for me, and it wasn't. The American people need to understand this person sat in front of us for 10 hours and told us there wasn't a shred of bias. Well, in fact, these words are his words. And by the way, the words of Lisa Page are just as bad. And they were being done on government phones, on government time, as these two had the ability to both help clear Hillary Clinton and to try to indict and, or one of his words, impeach President Trump. So these are very dangerous situations, one that led to his being relieved, fired, if you will, from the special investigation. And yet he sat there saying he'd never been biased, he didn't see it. It's pretty scary if somebody says that's not bias.
So do you think he can get away with that? That he could actually say, yes, my bias did not affect any decision making in the Russia-Trump collusion investigation?
Well, he can get away with it in the sense that I suspect he'll go off into retirement and probably be a hero of the left. He's not getting away with it with the American people. They heard his words. And by the way, Maria, one of the things we got out of him yesterday that I believe is going to lead to a subpoena is that substantially similar statements he and Lisa Page and others were saying on what he calls his private communications, and yet in his public communications, he's warning her certain things he wants to talk about that are business related on his private IM account. So we're not done with this. As you know, Judicial Watch got some additional information. There's a long way to go to clean up the Department of Justice and the FBI, so people like this are rooted out early on and not allowed to distort justice.
So for example, did the Bureau lie to the court about where it got information about the code for Manafort's locker? I recall them saying they got it from the guy who manages the locker company.
But there's also two different versions of what happened in that meeting based on whoever's memo you read. Joe, we got to run. Thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate it.
I mean, you guys have some work to do, because if the bias is affecting official action, that is a big, big problem. I yield back the balance of my time.
I'm in violent agreement with the statements you made after this report was published, that nothing in the report impugns the patriotic work of the FBI employees who are serving in my district and around the world, and this mess in Washington has nothing to do with them, and I want to make that very clear, and I appreciate your statements on that subject. Deputy Director, the Democratic memo that the President declassified says the Department of Justice accurately informed the court that the FBI initiated its counterintelligence investigation on July 31st, 2016. Did any investigative activity regarding the Trump campaign in Russia occur before July 31st, 2016?
Congressman, as you know, we're dealing with the Intelligence Committee on that issue, and Chairman Nunes met with Director Wray and me. I received the same briefing that he received. So I don't know any additional information beyond what he knows about that, and I'm not able to produce any information beyond what the FBI has told me. So,
are you aware, as you sit here today, of any payments that were made to any person to collect intelligence on the Trump campaign prior to July 31st, 2016?
No, but keep in mind I wasn't there. I only know what information that we've obtained from the FBI records.
Are you, as you sit here today, aware of any efforts to contact Roger Stone that occurred prior to July 31st, 2016?
I don't have any personal knowledge, Congressman, but I know that we are seeking to respond to Chairman Nunes' request. I think one thing you need to
understand. Same question as it regards to Michael Caputo.
I wasn't there, and so I can only answer questions that we directed the FBI and then have them...
You're there now, right? I mean, have you asked these questions of anyone?
We have absolutely conveyed all the questions that Chairman Nunes has raised, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to respond in fairly soon.
You could understand why it would be of tremendous importance to the country that if the Department of Justice has represented to a court that this investigation began on July 31st, and if the fact that you cannot tell me definitively that before July 31st there was not intelligence collected on the Trump campaign, that is something of great interest to us.
Congressman, I think you should understand that there is nobody more committed to rooting out abuse and misconduct than I.
Yeah, right.
We talk with the FBI. We take those allegations seriously, and we look to find any credible evidence. If we find it, we're going to produce it to Chairman Nunes.
Thank you. Let's do that quickly. Let's get into your determination to find out that activity which is occurring in your department. At the last hearing we had, I asked you when you first became aware that Nellie Orr, the wife of your Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, was working for Fusion GPS and was actively assigned to the dossier that said all these nasty things about President Trump. As you sit here today, do you know when you became first aware of that?
I believe it would have been sometime in the fall of 2017. As I think I told you last time, Mr. Orr was never working, to my knowledge, on that Russia investigation.
Well, his wife was, right? I mean, like, he's your assistant or your associate deputy attorney general, and his wife gets hired for that. I asked you this question on the 13th of December. I wrote you a letter on the 18th of December, 9 months ago. You have not responded to it. We need a date when you found out that the wife of your deputy was working for people who are actively trying to undermine President Trump. Don't you think that's a really important date for you to know about the spouse of your own associate deputy attorney general?
Yes, I think it's important for you to understand, Congressman, Mr. Orr is a career employee of the department. He was there when I arrived. To my knowledge, he wasn't working on the Russia matter.
I don't care if he's there 100
I think it's important for you to know, sir, that when we learned the relevant information, we arranged to transfer Mr. Orr to a different office.
Let's get to
in addition to that,
hold on, I'm sorry, I got to reclaim my time, Mr. Rosenstein. The FISA renewal that you signed, list for me the people who briefed you on the substance of that FISA renewal to go and spy on people.
So, Mr. Gates, here's one thing I think is important for you to understand. People can make all kinds of allegations publicly. I am quite confident about my conduct throughout this investigation. That matter is under review by the Inspector General. We'll see what the Inspector General finds.
Did you read the FISA application before you signed it?
I'm not going to comment about any FISA application.
So you won't say to this committee whether or not you even read the document you signed that authorized spying on people associated with the Trump campaign?
I dispute your characterization of what that FISA is about, sir.
Did you read it or did you not read it?
I'll be happy to review. I'll be happy to discuss the details with you. But as I told you, sir...
Did Peter Strzok brief you on it?
No.
Did Lisa Page brief you on it?
No.
Did Sally Moyer brief you on it?
Now, let me explain the process, if I may.
Well, did Tricia Anderson brief you on it?
No FBI personnel briefed me on it. The process, sir, is that these FISA applications and renewals first come up through the FBI chain of command. They are sworn under oath by a career federal agent. I'm not the affiant.
But you signed it.
I'll explain the process to you.
Did you thoroughly review it, yes or no?
I want to explain the process to you.
I'm out of time. Did you thoroughly review it?
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness will be permitted to answer the question.
I'd like to explain the process. Director Ray can explain it too, sir. My responsibility at that time was to approve the filing of FISA applications because only 3 people in the department authorized to be the final sign-off, the Attorney General, the Deputy, and the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, who at the time the position was vacant. This was my responsibility to do that. I have fortunately been relieved of that responsibility. Director Ray still does it every day. And I don't know exactly what his process is, sir, but we sit down with a team of attorneys from the Department of Justice, all of whom review that, provide a briefing for us about what's in it. And, sir, I've reviewed that one in some detail. And I can tell you, sir, that the information that's public about that doesn't match with my understanding of the one that I signed. But I think it's appropriate to let the Inspector General complete that investigation. These are serious allegations, and I don't do the investigation. I'm not the affiant. I'm reviewing the finished product, sir.
Are they
investigating? If the Inspector General finds that I did something wrong, then I'll respect that judgment, but I think it's highly, highly unlikely, sir.
So what that's about and why we're seeing the meltdown we're seeing among the Democratic activists.
Well, first, if you want to take a look at the Washington Post today, they got a quote by Barack Obama who says they're tearing their hair out. Take it easy, you guys. Look, they had a very bad week, Raymond. The Democrats did. The so-called Muslim ban was upheld. Public employee unions can't extort fees from workers. They have to win them over. You got the opening on the Supreme Court. You've got all of these things taking place, and now you've got a real panic, and there's talk in the Democratic Party now they want to abolish ICE.
We've been talking about that all morning. It's unbelievable.
Which means that, if the Border Patrol doesn't get them, doesn't capture them, I don't care if it's MS-13, they're here. Nobody can go after them. It's an act of insanity. And it's amazing the language they're using. They feel, Trump had a bad week, they felt, when you had the families divided down on the border, and all of a sudden he's had these succession of victories, and there's real panic in the Democratic Party, and you saw it with Bill Maher and with Michael Moore. So I think what's going to happen, is Trump had a very good week.
Yeah. What is the impact, Pat, of this 28-year-old socialist who really knocked Joe Crowley, who was a member of the Democratic leadership, out of his seat in Queens? What does this portend? The New York Times had that piece this weekend, the coming millennial socialists. where they see this wave of socialist young candidates for office. Is that a possibility? Is that the direction of things?
Here's the thing that, and she said so. She said so yesterday on TV. What's it,
Ocasio? Yeah.
Yeah, look, in her district, there was a 13% turnout. And Crowley, it's only a 18% white district now. It used to be about 58% when Crowley was elected, but they've given him the North Bronx, or the South Bronx, as well as Queens. And these are very much occupied by third world immigrant folks. And they overwhelmed Crowley, and Crowley had no organization, obviously, as everything's atrophied up there. But exactly, she is going to pull the party to the left. She pulled Crowley. He denounced ICE. Here's basically a Tip O'Neill Democrat denounced ICE as fascist. You've got the other night, Miss Nixon up there, who's running against the governor of New York. What did she call it? A terrorist organization. You're talking about Americans who are protecting the United States from MS-13, who are rounding up illegal immigrants who are beating their wives and driving drunk and killing people. They do all this dangerous and tough work to protect the country from people who have broken the law, broke into the country, and are committing crimes, and they're denouncing them as though they were brown shirts.
Former Director Comey, in sharing his memos with another individual who then shared them with a New York Times reporter, shared classified information.
Congressman, I do not know the answer to that, but the Inspector General of our department has jurisdiction to review that issue.
And are you aware of the report indicating that Jim Baker, the General Counsel of the FBI, was under investigation by the FBI for sharing classified information?
I believe that I read the media account that you're referring to.
Do you still have confidence in the FBI General Counsel?
I have confidence in the FBI, and I have confidence, Mr. Chairman, that Director Wray will make appropriate decisions with regard to his staff.
And finally, in an interview with NBC's Scott MacFarlane on December 6th, you indicated that you were satisfied with how the special counsel's investigation is proceeding. Why, after you've heard all the concerns expressed here today, why are you satisfied with the course of the investigation so far?
I'm satisfied, Congressman, because based upon what I know, which is different from what accounts may appear in the media, based upon what I know, I believe Director Mueller is appropriately remaining within his scope and conducting himself appropriately. And in the event that there is any credible allegation of misconduct by anybody in his staff, that he's taking appropriate action.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will have, I have no doubt, from both sides of the aisle, additional questions in writing. And we hope that you're able to answer those and answer them expeditiously. Again, I thank you. You're a little bit ahead, not much, but a little bit ahead of Director Wray's time. And I know the sacrifice it is to prepare for this and then to give us a better part of a day to answer these questions. But they're very important. The FBI is an incredibly important law enforcement organization. In my opinion, it's still the premier law enforcement organization in the world. Again, as I said earlier, there are tens of thousands of employees there who are very dedicated to doing the right thing, upholding the rule of law, and providing justice in the fashion that the blindfolded woman with balanced scales stands for. I think the department stands for that. But I do think at the higher levels of the department, there are some serious problems. The gentleman from Florida asked some questions very much related to this. And I think that while we all have confidence in Director Wray, we also believe that there need to be some changes made, both in terms of the personnel, in terms of the protocols that are followed, and certainly in terms of getting the necessary information to this committee and whatever other appropriate committees, so that all of this can be aired and the public's understanding that these problems are being solved and that they know what the nature of them are. So again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your work in a very difficult situation as Deputy Attorney General of the United States under these circumstances.
Thank you.
Right. It's a matter of showing up to want to get into the rally in a Planned Parenthood t-shirt, or, you know, Trump is a Nazi. You know, you can message to draw them out and draw them to punch you.
Fogle boasts about the extent of his network of operatives.
So here, you have a schedule of events. We update this on an ongoing, rolling basis every morning.
Those are all the Trump appearances.
These are all the Trump and Pence appearances. Tomorrow, for instance, we are turning out 500 people in front of the Trump International in D.C. We have to have people prepared to go wherever these events are, which means we have to have a central kind of agitator training. Yeah. You know, we have a built-in group of people in New York who do this. Okay. We have a built-in group of people in D.C. who do this.
I was going to say, are they localized?
We have a group of people in Vegas. We have a group of people in Colorado. We have a group of people in Minneapolis.
So I'm basically Deputy Rapid Response Director for the DNC for all things Trump on the ground.
This guy is Aaron Black. He works full-time for Creamer at Democracy Partners. He directs the spontaneous protests at Trump and Pence events. His real name is actually Aaron Minter. We don't know why he uses the name Black.
But abortion shouldn't be a luxury. It shouldn't be the new I summer in Montauk. It should be on the dollar menu at McDonald's. Hey, I'd like a large Diet Coke, and can you get this egg out of my McMuffin? So tonight, in honor of America, I'd like to do a salute to abortion in the Break's 10th annual Salute to Abortion.
Salute to murder.
Abortion, I salute you! Women, if you need an abortion, get one! If you want an abortion, get one! If you're not pregnant but you think you eventually might be and want to order a future abortion, get one! If you're pregnant and you want to be pregnant, don't get one! It's up to you, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's actually a great deal. It's about $300. That's like 6 movie tickets. Movie tickets, a bad deal. And women, don't forget, you have the power to give life, and men will try to control that. Don't let them! God bless abortions, and God bless America! Hi, I'm Michelle Wolf, host of The Break with Michelle Wolf. But abortion shouldn't be a luxury. It shouldn't be the new I summer in Montauk. It should be on the dollar menu at McDonald's. Hey, I'd like a large Diet Coke, and can you get this egg out of my McMuffin? So tonight, in honor of America, I'd like to do a salute to abortion in the Break's 10th annual Salute to Abortion.
You're saluting murder.
Abortion, I salute you! Women, if you need an abortion, get one! If you want an abortion, get one! If you're not pregnant but you think you eventually might be and want to order a future abortion, get one! If you're pregnant and you want to be pregnant, don't get one! It's up to you, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's actually a great deal. It's about $300. That's like 6 movie tickets. Movie tickets, a bad deal. And women, don't forget, you have the power to give life, and men will try to control that. Don't let them! God bless abortions, and God bless America!
You sick bitch.
Actors
trying to disrupt things in the United States. Across the board, every day, incoming from these other countries. That does not rule out the presence of other foreign actors. But perhaps the most egregious in revealing of all the lunatic, get him in the rubber room reactions regarding Trump-Russia, once again comes from the former CIA chief, John Brennan. The man, I'm sorry to say, I know it sounds uncharitable, is a complete embarrassment, spewing outrageous falsehoods while offering reckless advice.
Would there be a tendency for intelligence gatherers, briefers, to withhold now some vital intelligence to the president?
There very well might be. There might be, out of concern.
He went on to expand on that, but yeah, out of concern that the White House or the president would run to Sergei Lavrov or Putin himself. Think about that. This is the guy who headed up the CIA. By the way, the same one, I believe, who signed off on the unmasking without a warrant. He's essentially urging current intel officers, or giving basically tacit approval, to their concealing key national security information from the country's current commander-in-chief.
Obvious that he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's obvious he can't control his mind or his tongue. And what I've suggested, if now, because he's the nominee for the party, and he's entitled to briefings from the CIA, for example, I said publicly, give him fake briefings. Pretend you're briefing. Don't tell him anything that you don't want to get out. And that's how I feel about it. I think that the man is a loose cannon. I think he's done so much to hurt our country with our international relations already.
But as a Republican nominee, isn't he entitled to get those briefings?
Give him fake briefings.
What does that even mean?
It means they'll tell him stuff. He won't know the difference.
You're basically telling the intelligence community to lie to him.
No, I'm not going to lie to you, but I still have to tell you everything.
You're absolutely right, and I think that you've put your finger on an answer to the question I asked last, which was why would they put out these seemingly purposeless indictments? Well, I have no doubt in my mind that it has something to do with this upcoming Putin-Trump meeting and just trying to throw a stick in the spokes. Do you think I'm reading that correctly?
Yep.
No, I think it's an effort to undercut the president.
Yep.
I also think it's an effort to bolster the sagging credibility of Mr. Mueller, because his investigation is looking more and more to the American people like a partisan witch hunt, which it is. So it has that PR aspect, and they probably have a confidence that it will never get to trial. You'll recall the last time Mr. Mueller indicted 13 Russians, he was shocked when they showed up for trial. He's refused to produce anything in discovery, which they're entitled to under our system, and he's argued that he can't go to trial now because the matter is still under investigation. Well, if that's true, then why did he bring the indictments? That case is a shambles.
For the work that they do, and to see that their work product would be so cavalierly discarded was something that shocked us all. But what the president did yesterday in Helsinki went beyond disrespecting the men and women of the intelligence community. It was a wholesale betrayal of the values and interests of this country. Ronald Reagan once said that he didn't leave the Democratic Party left him. Had there been any doubt, it was removed yesterday.
Adam Schiff.
Everybody, Archie Bunker of 704 Hauser Street, veteran of the big war, speaking on behalf of Guns for Everybody. Now, question. What was the first thing that the communists done when they took over in Russia? Answer, gun control. And there's a lot of people in this country want to do the same thing to us here in a kind of conspiracy, see. You take your big international bankers, they want to, masticate the people of this here nation like puppets on a wing. And then when they get that done, turn us over to the communists.
Oh, Archie, I'm glad they put you on the stool. You look taller sitting down.
Now, I want to talk about another thing that's on everybody's mind today, and that's your stick-ups and your skyjackets. Which, if that was up to me, I could end the skyjackets tomorrow.
You could?
All you gotta do is arm all your passengers. And then he ain't got no more superiority there, and he ain't gonna dare to pull out no rod. And then your airlines, then they wouldn't have to search the passengers on the ground no more. They just pass out the pistols at the beginning of the trip, and then put them up again at the end. Great smoke. That's incredible,
Yeah, that's incredible, Archie, because it's true. But
country for 8 years and long before. So you understand, we had a totally divided country for 8 years and long before that. In all fairness to President Obama, long before President Obama, we have had a very divided. I didn't come along and divide this country. This country was seriously divided before I got here.
He was talking about the 16-year plan to destroy America, 8 years of Obama and then 8 years of Hillary. You can go back and see it's been going on much longer than that, since at least the foundation of the Federal Reserve, and you can see these people carrying out the plans of the Council on Foreign Relations and really trying to create the globalist one world government. And I think it's really sad that when we have so much access to open source information and data, how little people do research on their own and how willing they are